Hello and welcome to Unusual and Unlucky Deaths in World War One. This is my most popular presentation. It's been well received in branches of the Western Front Association, local history groups and societies. I thought it'd be a good idea to add a bit of commentary to this presentation just to give you some idea of what I'm doing, and it'll give you something to do while you're in lockdown. It's very much an abridged version of the presentation. I don't want to bore anyone, and I certainly don't want any nodding off at the back of the class. So if you're ready, let's crack on. First up is John Robert Sedgwick. Now, I've started with John for a very special reason. He's buried in St John's Cemetery in Padiham near Burnley in Lancashire, and it's actually the same cemetery that my dad's buried in. And on one of my numerous visits there, I saw a lot of Commonwealth war graves. I thought it'd be a good idea to do a bit of research on them. So I've started with the two nearest to my dad. John's the nearest, and a few plots down is another to Robert Bullen, or Bob as he's more popularly known. Now, Bob enlisted into the 11th Battalion, the East Lancashire Regiment, the ill-fated Accrington Pals. Now, I've got quite a few photos of Bob, a lot of information, and I've even got some copies of letters he wrote home, some of them on YMCA-headed notepaper. So he might be worthy of a podcast or even a webcast on his own. So if you look out for that in the future, I might just give it a go. Now, going back to John, he was actually born in Padiham, Lancashire in July in 1888. He lived with his father John, who was a cotton weaver, and his mother Nancy at 5 New Street in Padiham. He had 3 brothers, William, Elisha and Ernest, and he had 2 sisters, Elizabeth and Rosetta. By 1901, they'd moved to 14 K Street, where John was also a weaver working in the same weaving shed as his dad. He enlisted in Padiham on the 6th of October 1914 into the 5th Battalion, the East Lancashire Regiment. Now, on the 11th of March 1915, while he was at home on leave, he married Mary Elizabeth Ward, and they set up home in 81 Shakespeare Street, Padiham. John died on the 25th of July 1917. Now we get to the circumstances of his death. The previous December, he was with his battalion in Egypt. And on the 4th of December 1916, he was part of a working party that was attached to the Royal Engineers, and they were given the task of extending the railway lines. Now, on the 6th of December, John was riding on a train that was carrying the rails to extend the railway. It was a series of flatbed trucks, and the rails were placed on top of them. John was sat on the edge of one of the trucks. Now, as the train rounded a bend, it collided with a convoy of camels that were being led by another private. Now, I know that sounds a bit weird, but the local town of Avasia was a depot for the Imperial Camel Corps, so it's not quite as outlandish as it first appears. Now, the impact of the collision threw John off the train. He rolled down the embankment. The rails were also dislodged from the train. They rolled down the embankment, landed on John, pinned him down and rendered him unconscious. They got him out from underneath the rails and they took him to a local dressing station for immediate attention. 2 days later, he was admitted to the 27th General Hospital of Avasia, where he was operated on. He'd suffered a fractured spine which had resulted in paraplegia. Now, in January 1917, he was evacuated to England and he was admitted to the 2nd Western General Hospital on Whitworth Street in Manchester. On the 30th of April that year, he was transferred to Disbury Lodge, and he was discharged as no longer physically fit for active service on the 14th of July 1917. From there, he was sent to a disabled home for disabled soldiers and sailors at Park Grove in Manchester, where he died from his injuries on the 25th of July 1917. He was 28 years old, and as I said before, he's buried in Padiham Cemetery. This is a photograph of the headstone for John's grave. As you can see, he was 28 years old. Now, if you see the row of trees at the back, if you go up the left for about 10 yards, that's where my dad's buried. If you go down on the right for just a couple of yards, it's where Bob Bullen's buried. Next up is Harry Thomas Page. Now, Harry was born in Walsall in 1896. He lived with his parents George and Sarah at 66 Mount Street. He enlisted in Walsall on the 8th of December 1915. Originally into the 5th Battalion of the South Staffordshire Regiment. Now, he was later transferred to the 1st Warwickshire Battery of the Royal Field Artillery, where he was a driver. Now, when I say a driver, he didn't have a car, a van or a lorry or anything like that. He sat on the lead horse of a team of horses that were pulling some of the guns. He was also awarded the Military Medal during his service. On the 21st of October in 1917, he was part of a 6-man working party who were repairing a dugout that had collapsed. In the distance from them, about 100 yards away, there was an old abandoned tank. Now, a party of the Royal Engineers turned up and were going to dismantle the tank. However, what they didn't say was exactly how they were going to do that. They set a load of explosive charges inside the tank and they blew it up. Now you can imagine the scene. There's these 6 lads working away, they hear this explosion, they look up and all they can see is all this metal and other debris coming towards them. So they all dive for whatever cover they could find. Unfortunately for Harry, he couldn't find enough cover. He was actually hit by the side door of the tank. He was severely injured. He was admitted to the 27th Field Ambulance where he was operated on, but unfortunately he died there 6 days later on the 27th of October 1917. Now we come to Lance Corporal Arthur Cecil Rawson of the 1st Battalion, the Cambridgeshire Regiment. Arthur was born in Whittlesea in Cambridgeshire in 1888 and lived with his dad, who was a grocer, and his mother at the shop on Almshouse Street, which is now Market Street. He joined the Cambridgeshire Regiment in 1909 and he was in the Whittlesea Company. Now the battalion moved to Romford on the 8th of August 1914, just on the outbreak of war, and Arthur was given the task of forming a guard. So he instructed a section of men into how to load the rifles prior to going out on watch. He told them to leave a round in the breech, but with the safety on. Now this wasn't standard procedure. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Anyway, they went out for the first night on guard duty. It was a cold night, so they had the greatcoats on. And the night passed uneventfully, nothing happened, and they came off duty. Now each of the privates on the guard, they handed Arthur the rifle. He unloaded them and handed them back. Fortunately, when we got to the rifle of Private Alf Davis, he missed the bullet that was still in the breech. He passed it back to Alf, and the trigger caught on the button of his greatcoat and it went off, and it hit Arthur in the groin. Bullet entered his calf and it exited out through his thigh. He was taken to the nearby Coppage Hospital, where unfortunately he died through a loss of blood. Arthur's body was taken back to Whittlesea, where he received a full military funeral through the town. This photo shows the funeral procession going through the town. As you can see, it was well attended. Arthur's buried in the family plot at Whittlesea Cemetery. But that wasn't quite the end of the story. The man that fired that fatal shot, Private Alf Davis, later went on to become a stretcher bearer, and he was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal in 1916 for conspicuous gallantry while he was a stretcher bearer. He was seriously wounded in an attempt to bring in wounded men under very heavy fire. Now we come to Private John Edward Crellin. Now, I don't know if you remember, a few years ago there used to be a sketch show called The Fast Show, and in it there was a character called Unlucky Alf, and anything that could go wrong did with him. Well, I think John is the First World War's answer to Unlucky Alf. He was born in Manchester in 1894. He lived with his grandparents John and Anne at 14 East Street, Ancoats. He enlisted in Bury, originally into the Lancashire Fusiliers, and he was later transferred to the 4th Battalion, the Royal Lancaster Regiment. He died on the 21st of August 1917 and is buried at Dozingham Military Cemetery in Belgium. Now here's where the Unlucky Alf element comes into it. He accidentally shot the middle finger off his left hand while he was cleaning his rifle. Now he was being treated at the 61st Casualty Clearing Station when a German plane flew overhead, dropped a bomb on the hospital and killed everybody outright. That concludes this much shortened presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it and it's a bit of something for you to think about. The actual talk itself takes about an hour, and there's always a question and answer session. Then I give people a bit of advice on how to research their ancestors during the war. I hope you've enjoyed it and tune in for some more in the future.